I worked on female unemployment. That was my thing. That's what I got was my dissertation topic. So I started life as a labor economist. And soon after getting a doctorate, I went and lived in Europe, and then I lived in Africa. So I started living in other places, partly because of my curiosity about how do things work elsewhere, and do all these sort of, we pretend like these economic theories are widely applicable, but do other people live with them or live by them? Or is this just something we're made up? So, and as I progressed through that, I bumped into this thing that economists call public choice, which is the application of economic concepts or theories to explain collective choice, in particular, the nature of political governance. What can we expect from, say, in particular, of course, most of us are interested in democracy. So it looks into how incentives influence voters, how it influences political parties, politicians, bureaucrats, and so on. I thought I came up with something novel, and I wanted to apply public choice to diplomatic behavior. Didn't go anywhere yet. It's still kind of a working paper, but it was kind of a whole, in a way, of some aspect of how it affects foreign policy and so on. So anyway, then I found there's a guy named Hayek. And so I started thinking about, engaging ideas about maybe some aspects of political philosophy that he introduced. And then I mixed that with the sort of property rights that I understood and institutional economics. And so I'm kind of a mess. But I have wide-ranging interests because of all those things. So one of the things that I'm interested in is this problem of social order. So social order means, how do we live with one another? And how do we know that it's a good way? Is there another way? Or what is the right way? Or is there a right way? So lots of questions about it. So this is what I'm going to try to explore in my own sort of simple way as an economist, not a philosopher. Now, philosophers have a lot more questions and maybe go deeper than I do, but I'm going to try to. So I kind of start with this idea. Now, one aspect of social order is there justice? Is the outcome of the interactions, does it satisfy some sense of justice? Well, this is a kind of a pessimistic view of democracy that suggests that we should be alert to the fact that democracy may not, even though whatever the intent is, whatever the promise is supposed to be, it may not deliver it. So we're going to explore this idea. Thomas Jefferson said, we face two enemies, We need to be alert that if we enlist the state, it may be as bad as a disease from which we want it to be protected. So again, this is kind of okay, let's be alert. We're going to rely on democracy to do good things, protect us. But so again, this was why Jefferson was a believer in limited democracy. So the Constitution of the United States, that whole sort of experiment was trying to find a way to limit the capacities of the democratic state from misbehaving. So this idea of limited democracy. Now, another really famous guy said, civil society tends to emerge if individualism, I was going to say trumps, but that's complicated, triumphs over collectivism and the spirit of liberty overwhelms authoritarianism. Now, well, not so famous, but it's kind of an idea. So civil society is part of this social order. And, what I probably won't have time later, so I'll tell the punchline before I tell the joke. But, civil society really is in many ways, a repudiation of state authority. In other words, we don't need you. And in fact, if there's too much of you, there's no civil society. But I'll get into that later. Okay, so again, similar thing. I'm going to talk a little bit about economics. Try to, think about what this idea of social order is. And again, my perspective is, well, it's, one of the really good ways to live, I think, is to be as free as possible. Not to be free as a bird with no responsibility. Now, my university in Guatemala, our mission statement is we want to educate our students to be free and responsible human beings. So freedom without responsibility or accountability, it's not freedom. I mean, it is for me, but not for you. So these are things that I'm going to explore. Are there sort of supportive things that behind this idea of social order? Again, I'm giving away some of the ideas here. Now, is power consistent with human liberty? So this is going to be an important point. Again, I'll let you off the hook. Elon Musk is very rich. He has no power over me. Joe Biden is very old. He has a lot of power over me. What's the difference? Well, one guy has political power. The other guy has, well, I don't like to call it even economic power, but he has market dominance or market presence. Now, can I escape Joe Biden? Pretty tough. I mean, even if I left the country, they send Interpol after me. Elon Musk, he doesn't care about me. I hate you. I'm not worried about Elon Musk. Okay, so it is possible that Elon Musk could control, but he probably used the state to do it. In other words, he would depend on political power to seek retribution. Anyway, I shouldn't give away everything. All right, now, this is going to be a little bit different approach. I talked about scarcity and conflict, but in this case, instead of resource allocation, I'm thinking about, how does that influence the social order? Okay, so it's a little bit, the other conversation we had about scarcity was focusing on the nature of resource allocation. This is on, how do we live with each other? Now, again, we still have the conflict problem. Now, how do we solve it? Because that's the social order. So how do we confront this thing and how do we solve it? Well, again, we talked about this. Violence, theft, and slavery. That solves it for some people. Or peace, trade, and cooperation. Now, these are two types of social order. It's the way people live and interact with one another. And again, I would choose one over the other. And then most people, and again, I think this is what civilization is. Civilization is the discovery that this is intolerable. And that people, through the force of argument or force of arms, through revolutions, moved sort of in this, maybe not in all of these ideas, but they moved at least away from the other one. So it was, maybe in a way we're lucky, we have what we have because other people suffered. And it was their suffering that led them to the rebellions and revolutions that brought us where we are. So what happens, the social order is about predictability. So I know that when I come into this room, most of you wouldn't want to attack me and take away my phone or overwhelm me. So there's predictability. I go into the cafe coffee day and I order an espresso. They're not going to give me something to poison me. There's predictability because I know, and even if there wasn't a police to protect me, they wouldn't want to do it because they would kill me and they wouldn't have a customer. So there's lots of things that, these kind of, the social order gives us. So the more order and predictability, the more cooperation, the more peaceful interaction. So I think it's important. I mean, so there's this discovery of what makes up the social order, what generates the social order. This is our quest. This is our thing. So if the social order is adaptable, then we have progress. Progress can be material, spiritual, okay, all these things. Too many people think that economists only care about GDP, about material things. But in fact, we're concerned about humans. Do humans only consume? No, they have love, they have interactions, they have spiritual needs, so on. So progress is really a big package. Now, the institutions that I believe will support a social order that will lead to human flourishment. I love that word, flourishment. Flowers, flourishment. It feels good to say it. I mean, it gives me goosebumps. It's wonderful. So we can have good or bad social orders. Genocide, apartheid. I lived in South Africa under apartheid. I don't think caste is a great way to live. I mean, a lot of people find it problematic. So there's lots of social orders. And, the caste system existed for a long time here. It was an order, in the sense that people did it. But was it a good order? Maybe, certainly for some people, it's problematic. Again, apartheid, obviously. I was white, if you were African, tough life. Actually, Indians were under the apartheid regime. Chinese and Japanese were honorary whites. You guys, unfortunately, didn't make the cut. Ask Gandhi. Anyway. Now, how do we judge a social order? Well, I think in terms of some sense of morality, is it moral? Is it morally just for white people to treat Africans as subhumans? Yeah. Some people didn't question it, maybe. Is it a just system that people who are have black skins can't do certain jobs or can't marry certain people? I mean, these are crazy. I mean, these are interesting ideas. So, in a way, these are at least two ends that most of us would see as something nice about a social order. You want to live in a moral social order, one that would promote justice. And justice, one aspect of justice is that women don't have privileges that men don't have. And women aren't discriminated against in favor of men or whatever, or blacks or Muslims or Jews or whoever. So some sense of justice means that we're all pretty much treated as humans. And the other things are unimportant. So one way, again, we could have an imposed planned order, like Soviet Union was an imposed planned order. And again, they were motivated by the common good, or at least they said they were. And in fact, some of them believed it. And then, of course, then it became irrelevant because once you get it going, all the ideology is put aside because you're so busy administrating, and he is not cooperating. And administratively, and again, the motivations were good, so the administration must be right, you must be punished. You need to be eliminated, maybe. You refuse to, because if you're not eliminated, she might follow your lead. So this is how, well, anyway, you know the story. You've heard it before. So what happens is that it's really about the real threat in our lives is political power. Political power. Now, the other way is to live in a social order where, and again, this sounds chaotic. It sounds problematic. Planning. I mean, we know what will happen. They decided for us what. That's chaos because they don't know what we want. The least important person or thing under the central plans, the least important element of society, of central planning, were individual human beings as consumers. I didn't want that. It's the plan. I don't like that. It's the plan. It doesn't matter what you want. I can't afford it. It's the plan. Consumers had no presence in the plan. It was this conceptualization of what a good society would be. And if you didn't like it, you're the problem, not the plan. Now, so this seemingly chaotic system gives us this. I remember, I resisted buying a smartphone. I had a Nokia. I'm doing text. Nobody needs to do more than SMS. People say, "What you get there?" I said, "I don't need it." I didn't know I needed it. And how did it come about? Well, because people were free enough to discover or to invent or to offer and to fail in offering things to other people. So instead of the sort of planned order, which leads to chaos, we have a spontaneous order that leads to orderliness. I mean, it's almost impossible to have a coherent and sustainable social order if you have central planning that is delivered to us by an elite. They don't have the information. If they get the information, it's outdated once they start looking at it. The Soviets, one of my friends was ambassador to the Soviet Union. I've never been to Russia. I've only been to the Soviet Union. Went to visit. And, the KGB collected so much data on everybody. The Stasi in East Germany. They couldn't process it. And if they did, it would be irrelevant because people live dynamic lives. What I do today is not what I did yesterday or tomorrow. So it's idiotic in a way, if you think about it, that these people imagine that they can anticipate your needs when you couldn't, and you don't anticipate your needs. Because, it's raining tomorrow morning. Well, you didn't expect rain. Oh, you have to buy an umbrella. Well, if it didn't rain, you didn't need an umbrella. How do you build that into the plan? I mean, just serendipity, things like that. Or you see somebody with stupid shoes like mine. Oh, no, you wouldn't want these. But anyway, who knows? New information, you create new behavior patterns. So what we're going to look at is this thing that people call the rule of law. And I think this is our key to understanding a social order that is guided by a certain morality and can deliver justice. So what is the rule of law? Well, in a way, in modern thinking or in modern sort of experience, we can trace it back to the Magna Carta, where the dukes and earls got the king to agree that no law that they should not be treated any differently from him. They didn't care about the serfs, the peasants. They cared about themselves. The serfs and peasants, us, came later, but this was kind of a beginning where the dominant political power could not be superior in terms of rights to the people that he would be commanding. So it was a way of saying, okay, no privileges for you, no privileges for us. We're all the same. And of course, over time, we became democratized. So we said, oh, all citizens. So I think, this is what now, the rule of law does not necessarily, it's a metaphysical thing. It doesn't really require an enforcement mechanism. Some enforcement mechanisms might support it, but it's neither necessary nor sufficient to have, legislated rules, because people begin to say, well, it's just not fair that women are treated differently than men. It's not fair. People see that. They understand. Eventually, it may take, in the United States, it took time before we gave women to vote, for example. Big mistake, but I'm not going to debate that. No laughter. Sorry. Maybe you believe it. Okay. Anyway, so the rule of law is an evolutionary. It's something we discovered was a good way or better way or sensible way to live. It wasn't, somebody didn't wake up, we need the rule of law. And it needs to apply to everybody. It evolved over time. And that suggests to me that if it was acceptable over a long period, it must have worked pretty well. Or we would reject it and move on to something different. But in fact, what's happened is that we're trying to refine it. So we began with the dukes and earls challenging the king, and we get citizenship. Then we recognize women as citizens, or in America, blacks as citizens that were previously slaves or whatever. So, civilization is sort of an improvement on previous conditions. So to understand it, it really is the absence of privileges. Everyone's treated the same. So you don't get a subsidy. Government should not give a subsidy because he has to pay for it. You don't get a privilege. You're not protected. Your industry is not protected because he's going to have to pay more to buy your product because you're not buying a cheaper one. So what we discover here in a very simple way, almost every legislated rule violates the rule of law because people are treated differently. They pass rules that give privileges to one group at the expense of another. And we pretend that democracy is working for us. Well, if the rule of law is one of the fundamental underpinnings of democracy, somebody hasn't read the history. Well, they don't care. It's the vote bank. Oh, democracy is about... Here, if you read the textbooks, especially in political science, or you Google it, democracy is about the peaceful transfer of power. That's terrifying. I don't want them to have power. There's a peaceful transfer of leadership, maybe. But everybody says a peaceful transfer. Google it. Look at the power. No. Democracy was escaping power. Power was autocracy, monarchy. It's not. Who believes that? Political scientists. They don't see a problem with it. I see a problem. So I see a problem with it. Now, the rule of law should be, well, it is. I mean, we learn about it, that it's not fair to treat people differently because they're different, Now, again, we're not perfect. Some countries accept that. Like I say, the United States, women couldn't vote, but then we, actually the Swiss, women, when was it? It was in the 90s. Yeah. So they were smart, but never mind. And everybody is affected equally. Okay. Now, this isn't explicit. Now, I think it's not explored, certainly by, not as much by political scientists or political philosophers. I mean, there's some, Robert Nozick, for example, talks a lot about this, but most of them, did not really explore this. But the way I think about it is, if you don't think that slavery is an acceptable arrangement, the sort of opposing arrangement is self-ownership. Instead of you owning me, I own myself. Now, if I own myself and I can't be enslaved, this is the outcome of my efforts. Whatever I did in life was probably overvalued, but anyway, I had enough to buy this. Okay? Now, if you take it away from me, or if you take away my money, in a way, you've separated my capacity to own myself, because this is an outgrowth of me doing what I do, that is, living my life. So the reason theft is immoral is that it's very similar to slavery. So if you steal my hand phone, it's like you locked me in a closet and made me work to buy the phone, and then you took it away from me. It's like slavery. So theft is wrong because it's morally objectionable in the same way that slavery is. Now, the most basic human right is the right to property. Because if you take my property away, you've taken away part of my life. And if we agree that slavery is inappropriate, then we agree that theft is inappropriate, and the sort of non-consensual transfers of property is a form of theft. That's why many libertarians will say taxation is theft. It's a little bit too glib, but that's their thinking about it. Yes, sir.
Sorry, slightly tangential, but also slightly controversial, but I'll still ask. Should people, in your opinion, be allowed to willingly enter into contracts where they agree to slavery?
Again, let's not go there, but I would say no. No, most sensible people, you might do it under very unusual circumstances to save your family's life or something, but those are so tangential that this is for philosophers to meddle with. And I'm not a philosopher, but you and I can discuss it later. But this is a common question, of course, obviously. But sorry? Well, okay, I'm not a philosopher, okay? I'm an economist. Ask me about what the price is. Okay. I'll come back to that if I don't run out of time. Okay, now, if governments promote okay. You may not agree with, but you understand my drift here. I'm saying that if I have property, of course, it could have been given to me, but it's still up to me to dispose of it. It is part of this kind of self-ownership concept, because even if it was given to me, it's what I might have used to promote my life. And so you're not entitled to it. So governments that promote human liberty, and the only way the common good can be promoted is by promoting the individual preferences and interests. There's no common good, like I said, that's under a rock somewhere that's written down. And it's really, it's a problematic concept in some way, because when we say it, it's as though it exists, but it kind of exists. But the common good at this moment in time is not the same common good in 5 seconds, because you've all changed. The people in, Liberia have changed, or whatever. And why should we only talk about the common good of India or the United States? We talk about the common good of humanity. It's a problematic, assertion. So, but what we're trying to do is limit arbitrary acts of other people against us, stealing, enslavement. But the biggest thing and the biggest problem in our lives is that political actors acquire political power. And if we're asleep in our democratic process, they will do it. In fact, they've done it. We let them do it. And it was under the guise of giving you democracy. Now, democracy is not about these two guys deciding to take away her tablet, but that's the way it operates. Democracy was not meant to be a game of redistribution. Democracy was invented or imagined as a way of protecting liberty and property. Redistribution is about taking away your liberty because you refuse to give your property to give to someone else. This is what democracy has become. This to me is a big, I grew up in America, 1950s. And America was still living under those delusions, or at least I was naive to it. So democracy is a great thing. 4th of July, peaceful transfers. Power, I didn't think about it. What we have now is a big disappointment to me. So I blame public choice scholars. Yeah.
Is government the biggest perpetrator of political power?
Yeah. Well,
So how can government limit political power?
Well, the thing was, the way that was imagined was through a constitutional framework. Of course, they started cheating once the ink was dry. Well, maybe before the ink was dry, because the incentives are such that, and part of the problem today is that we have professional politicians. Now, in America, when we the founding fathers imagined who would lead America, it would be a farmer, a business person, a housewife maybe. Well, no, because, well, anyway. You know, somebody with real life experience. They come into government, serve their time, and then step out. And they would come in with real life experience. They would understand, you know, what's it like to be a citizen? What's it like, the relationship with government? But now we have professional politicians. They never had a job. They never started a business, never borrowed money, never had to fire people because of, you know, not being able to meet the budget or whatever. They don't, I mean, they're detached from our lives. But of course, we admire them sometimes, you know. Donald Trump is the guy they imagined, unfortunately. Not Joe Biden. Now, they're both a disaster, but I mean, it would be comical if it wasn't so problematic. But, you know, Donald Trump, in a way, is that person they imagine. He's a business guy. Now, like him or love him, that is a strong point of him, because he has real world experience, you know, and he, you know, the things that politicians think are really important, he goes, that's stupid, you know. So has common sense about some of those things, but the rest of it's, I tell people, I said, you know, if they put a gun to my head, Harris, Trump, pull the trigger. Anyway, so as I said before, most legislation violates the rule of law. Nobody talks about that. Progressive taxation. Now, how many people think that women should pay a higher tax rate than men? It's a human attribute. Gender, sex, whatever you want to call it. Tall people, people with dark hair. People with dark hair should pay more than people with... Nobody believes it. People that are making more money should pay a higher tax rate than people that make less money.
I mean, as long as the basic number is zero, I do not mind paying as many times tax as I want.
You know what zakat is? Zakat.
Yeah.
It's a Muslim tax on wealth. Is it a progressive tax or is it a flat tax?
It's
a flat tax, 4%. God's smart. In the Christian church, they have what they call tithing. It's 10%. It's a flat tax.
Tithing is voluntary,
though. Huh?
Tithing is voluntary.
Well, again, they're both voluntary. Well, they're obligations, but they're voluntary. I mean, okay. No, but not every Muslim pays, you know, okay. So we won't have to touch on that, but they're flat taxes. God was smart, because if he said, if zakat was 25%, there'd be a lot of sinners. They would leave the church, or they would lie and have to go to confession. God forgive me. So, the progressive tax violates the rule of law, just as taxing women more than men. Rates, it's a tax rate rather than... So anyway, this is really... How does this escape political scientists? Wait, he had...
So standard argument against any kind of redistribution is that there are a lot of people in countries like ours who don't have their basic security needs met. So, you know, what do we do about that?
Well, okay. Now, okay, I mean, so he's saying there are people who are disadvantaged either in some way, that they have less than other people. Well, okay, first of all, it's probably, what's the threshold? I don't know. And what is the obligation of the person living in Assam for the person living in Kerala? You'll never see them. The guy in Assam has an aged mother who's very ill. He needs to pay for a hospital. And the guy down in Kerala, well, I mean, he's pretty healthy, but, you know, there's no job opportunities down there, and he needs money. How do we know that redistribution is just? You know, what are the criteria to know who should give and who should receive? That's, to me, a very problematic issue. Now, of course, what's happened before there were modern governments that would engage in redistribution, there was family, there were neighbors, and then maybe it was nobody. But why should this one be responsible when they have their own obligation? Did they ask me? Now, if I'm your neighbor, and again, there's no moral obligation here. I have no moral obligation to help anybody. No moral obligation. Now, if there's a moral obligation, I do it. Because that's what a moral obligation is. It's a voluntary act. But a coercive act using the state to take away from this guy at the risk of going to prison if he doesn't do it to help his mother stay out of it or get her out of the hospital because he doesn't want to give money to somebody he never met. There's a morality questions there. There's justice questions there that are not answered. It's just, oh, they should do it because of those conditions. Well, I don't know what the conditions are. What are the criteria?
Love is what Agamben said about this idea of state of exception. That sovereign is he who decides the state of exception. But to decide the state of exception, he has to step outside the ambit of rule of law itself. So that gives him the powers.
Well, again, that would be war. Okay, sovereigns, who prosecutes war? I mean, there's a sovereign. Well, war, I'm a pacifist. That's a problematic exception. And I'm the one that has to die. That's an exception. He doesn't die. So again, we explore these things, but there's no objective criteria that tells us that it's the right thing, or it's the best thing, or it's a good thing for most, even utilitarian measurements for most of us. So I find that really a problematic assertion. But again, it's used as an excuse to acquire more resources, more political power. That's what it's about. Now, okay, I'm corrupt. I'm a public official. That means I want more money. I want more power to protect myself. I'm a good person. I want to help people. I need more power to do it. I need more resources to do it. Who's a loser? You are. You have to give up freedom. You have to give up resources. Bad or good? Now, you're lucky if they're good, maybe. I'm not even sure you're lucky because they're going to redistribute and they're going to come to you to do it. So, I mean, these are very complex arguments or outcomes, even arguments. But I don't think because of the lack of a clear sort of roadmap to what is a just distribution of income, what is a good distribution. I don't know. I don't pretend. I know, and I'm absolutely convinced nobody else has that. So the rule of law is interdependent. It is one of the things that gives us some security in principle with respect to markets, because again, markets are only human beings trying to make themselves better off by interacting peacefully with others. I mean, Marxists or people that hate markets think markets are like this blackboard or whiteboard. You know, it's this thing. Well, it's not a thing. It's human action. If you don't like markets, you don't like humans. Because markets are just humans trying to improve their lives. So, I mean, how do you hate markets? But people do. Partly because they don't understand the nature of what, and in fact, maybe economists are guilty of that because we use these elaborate econometric models. So that's kind of like abstract from people's lives. But the way I approach economics is, centered on humanity. Society doesn't bleed. Society doesn't breathe. But I could cut you. That's the only reality. These are conceptions. If we treat these conceptions as though they're realities, we ignore this one. So we need property rights if we want people to be able to improve their lives. Because it's only when we have markets, that is, transferring property rights voluntarily among others, that we have that possibility to improve. There's no guarantee. Again, there's going to be people that, maybe you want to help. Well, help them. Go ahead. Don't ask me. I might help them because I trust you. And I say, okay, yeah, okay. I trust you and you help them, so I'll help. But I have no moral obligation. I may have a legal obligation, but there's no morality in states, governments, taking from one person in order to give to someone else. Moral action is voluntary, not coerced. And I can't pretend to be a moral person as a politician to take her money to give to him. And they do that. It's as though it's their money. It's not their money. It's your money. And so it's actually immoral. Because you become someone else's servant against your will. Now, if you want to be their servant, that's moral. You say, I will serve you. I will give you some of my income. So, again, these questions aren't asked in the political framework. We just pursue. Did you, someone over here? No. Okay. Okay. Oh, yeah. Another one?
I'll talk to you later.
Oh, okay. Now, so I'll make an assertion. Trade and peace are better than theft and aggression. Now, you may want to fight me over that. Sorry, it's just, again, I've visited 100 countries more, lived in many, and this is what I've come up with. But you may have another observation. So now, what are our obligations? Well, I respect your rights and your freedom. Now, with legislation, I have other obligations. If they assign a right to education, I have an obligation to pay for it. Where'd that come from? What's the moral basis of that? Well, I said, no, what's the moral basis for it? Sure, you said it. You invented it. One of the most frightening documents is the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. Because all of them, you have a right to a job. I have to hire you? I don't know you. If I give you a job, I can't fire you. You have a right to education. You have all these rights. They're invented rights. The only right you have is to your human liberty and your private property. That's the only right we have as human beings, unquestionably. To live your life as long as you don't engage in unprovoked aggression against others, and in other words, you respect their rights and their freedom. That's it. That's it. Again, sorry, I'm not a philosopher, so I don't get into the weeds of things, but for me, I'm a simple guy. I really think that this is it. This is all we have. So if we respect other people's human liberty and their property, it's the best we can do. Now, it won't be perfect. Again, I'm not utopian here. Yes, ma'am.
So, when you say right to educate, when it's there, for instance, in India, they read it into the Article 21, that is right to life. But I think little bit of nuance is that when it's put in as a right, whether by a statute or in the Constitution, every right has an opposite duty, and the duty is on the state. It's not on anybody around you.
Wait. This reminds me. I went to a gathering in the city council.
That's the next part.
Well, wait. Let me just stop you there. On the city council, someone was saying, look, the taxpayer should not be burdened with this. The government should pay.
No, I'll just finish.
And that's what it sounded like you were saying.
No, so.
Wait, okay, what did you say? Wait, what did you say?
When I say the obligation is on the state, it means the state has a duty to not discriminate others
Well,
when it comes to education.
Yeah.
That's what it means. Give free, equal treatment when it comes
Why
to
should the state
providing
give education?
See, we are taking it as a status quo that the state is providing education. Okay?
Why? It's a bad idea. How good is your education in the public schools? Terrible. Is that an argument against it? I think it is. James Tooley did an investigation of the public schools here. He found that in most instances, the teachers weren't there. And the principals weren't there. It was a waste of money. So budget private schools, the market answered it. Budget private schools. So again, I'm picking on that particular example, but there's so many things that we believe that well, we don't believe it because we don't think it through, that the state just does. Now, who would build the roads? Well, who's going to fix the roads? I mean, just going down to Green Park Market, like big holes in the road. They don't care. In their colonies where they live, roads are perfect. Anyway, they don't drive. They've got drivers. So there's lots of things like education that it's the states. Now, I would agree that if there is a private education, the state should not say that women can't be educated. Okay? But that's kind of like, well, we don't need the state to secure that. So, I mean, these ideas say, well, women should be able to be educated. They should have the right to be educated or the freedom. So, yeah, nuances are the spider web, in this case, a politician, because they.
Ask a private person to not discriminate against giving a female education. Right? They can give whoever they want to. Even if I'm ready to pay 10 times more, they won't. But I believe that's why you have to have.
Okay, okay.
But if you are willing to pay 10 times more, I take the money and provide it.
Yeah.
No, but if you are saying like that millionaire example he gave, I just don't want to give my
You know,
house to a millionaire.
I tell you, wait, and one of the sad realities of humanity is that at any moment in time, we are retrograde about our attitudes about whatever, gender, sex, whatever, according to the future. Now, in your grandmother's time, if you turned up looking like that with no sleeves, sitting next an unmarried man that wasn't your husband, disaster. You might be stoned. Who knows? Now, so happily, humanity escapes some of these stupidities or whatever. The moral judgment. I mean, a girl that she's showing her feet, you know. God, I mean, these things were unacceptable at a certain time. But we happily, if we let humanity to progress, we will get better. We'll never make it perfect. No human arrangements will be perfect. So when I grew up, we had separate schools for black people. It's unimaginable. It's unimaginable. But that's what it was. Now, we progressed. I mean, several hundred years, we had slaves. I mean, it's unimaginable. But again, we progressed. This is a good thing. So, but most of those things were not, almost never at the motivation of political agents.
I mean, with regards to the concern on private schools not hypothetically admitting women, I would say if you have a for-profit school, why will you not want to have 50, like double customers than what you currently have?
And that usually, well, wait. Again, we can't.
Because, I mean, most of the discrimination, you cannot even apply that to India because India does not really have truly for-profit schools. There are pseudo, I mean, even the for-profit schools.
Let's not get trapped on a particular example. Okay, let's Again, let me have the last word on this. No arrangement is going to be perfect. But if we have enough sort of flexibility, these social arrangements will improve over time because of the injustice, or the economic incentive for people. I mean, discrimination in the U.S., for example, and also in South Africa. I lived there under apartheid. Apartheid, the cutting edge of apartheid became irrelevant because the market demanded it. You know, the restrictions on Africans doing certain jobs. Well, there weren't enough white people, so people cheated on it, and they hired black people. So over time, that discrimination against blacks began to disappear, and eventually it went away. Now the blacks discriminate against the whites. Maybe an improvement. But again, what happens is that the changes are not perfect, but humans are always sort of testing the boundaries. So some people, challenge this idea. Why should women be excluded? And then maybe some entrepreneur said, well, I'll double my income by bringing them in. So, okay, anyway, sorry. Okay, what are the conditions? Well, we start with this idea. No one's naturally entitled to dominate others. Now, I have this sort of, non-scholarly approach to what I would call natural rights. There's a natural rights sort of idea in social philosophy. But mine is just about human nature. If we understand humans as they are, as humans, no one is entitled to dominate them. There's no, there was a divine right of kings. Remember, that was the monarchs of Europe. God gave me this right. God supports this right. Now we began to explore this idea of self-ownership, self-governance. Democracy was about, sort of moving away from all of that to give us this sort of stable social order, peaceful arrangements, and so on. Unwarranted or unprovoked violence or aggression is unjust. I mean, it's not just for you to punch me in the face. It's just not fair. I mean, most people think, in most instances, justice, not to confuse with John Rawls necessarily, but justice is kind of something about being fair, according to your standards. But most people think that kind of it's unfair. You're bigger than me, whatever. Now, how do we know what freedom is? How do we identify it? Well, there's several. Lord Acton is associated with this sort of ideas that, you're free from violence, aggression, illness, poverty, free to escape your body. If you want to take your life, for whatever reason. That's what we call negative freedom. And then the freedom to actualize and to achieve things is positive freedom. It's kind of a fun thing, an interesting thing to try to delineate them, but I think they're interlinked. One really presupposes the other. That's just, again, my naive, non-philosopher's interpretation of it. So instrumentally, we're free if we can be ourselves. Well, at the event the other day, they said you should dress in business casual. Well, I had business, I had my jacket, and I had casual. I was the only one that followed the rules. So people know me that way. When I met Barun, he looked like most of you, and now he wants to look like Tagore. He's free to be himself. I didn't say, that's ridiculous. Why? No, this is what makes us human. Work together, be autonomous, I don't want to, I'm sorry, Parth. I don't like your ideas. These are things that we have to have, the capacity to choose how we interact. So, freedom gives us the capacity. It doesn't give us a guarantee, and you might be better off than me, but we'll all be potentially better off. Now, some people might gain a lot more than others. I don't care about that. I don't care that. Does Musk's billions threaten my life or existence? I don't care. It's got nothing to do with me. He got rich because people liked what he did. He didn't take from anybody like politicians or bureaucrats do, babus. They get rich because they take. Now, so this is one of the problems with the complaints about income distribution. If those distributions are based upon force and coercion, they're unjust. If they come through market transfers, voluntary, without state involvement, It's just. And I don't know if you ever read the Divine Comedy. Envy was projected to be one of the lowest depths of hell. So envy is a really evil sort of human attribute, and it's understood as that way. But envy is what drives income redistribution. What the rich don't pay their fair share. You know, these kind of arguments that we hear in America. It's complete nonsense. Yeah.
I don't completely understand the part where freedom from illness and poverty. What does that mean?
From
Negative freedom.
the negative freedom. Well, it's freedom from people interfering with you doing what you want to do. So it's a freedom from, as opposed to a freedom to. That's, I mean, again, I think they're too linked to really. Now, conceptually, it might be interesting as a philosopher to try to delineate these, but I think we lose time, you know, and I think we might lose focus on the aspects of humanity. Yeah.
Someone who's at the bottom of the pyramid and who doesn't have access to basic stuff which can make him, better. So what do we do about that in this sort of setup?
Okay, if we're going to hypothetical, why are they there? Okay, well, let's say no legs, no arms. Okay, real problem. And usually there's enough human sympathy or empathy in the people around you, or there's not, and you may perish. Well, that's now able-bodied. They can't get ahead because of the institutional arrangements, caste, apartheid, government regulations. You know, I mean, it really matters how people got to the bottom of the pyramid and whether the institutional arrangements give them the possibility to, on their own initiative, move out of that. And that's a problem we can address. Now, the one about, again, if we get the extreme cases of the terrible conditions of the worst possibilities of humanity, we never advance into, because those are real tough problems. It may well be that person just doesn't survive. Now, should we hold up the advancement of the whole community as a way of trying to, and it may only a fraction of the population, but very often politicians try to create an image in our mind is that's what they're doing. It's those very, as I say, historically, either the family, the neighbors, or a religious institution often address those problems. They don't do it anymore because, well, the state will do it, And governments hate competition. The welfare state is a very,
Yeah, so this is similar to that question. So a scenario that's more likely to be happening in real life. Say there's a small village and a poor family.
Yeah.
And if there's a private public school, they're sending their girl child to that school. How would the market fix that? Because say there's a private school who's charging some amount, very minimum, say, some amount of money from the family. And they would rather send, now because there is a cost associated with it, they would rather send the sons. And anyway, the daughters would be more efficient at home and more productive at home. So how would the market
culture is a messy thing. How did we get here? Well, historically, because of the agricultural bias of a boy child was more valuable than a girl child for physical reasons or whatever. So again, these things, so we get to this point now. Now here we are, and there's still this sort of bias. It has no connection to any sort of economic reality or necessity. But we still, it's just a historical. Now, governments can't force people to change their culture. Okay, we're going to pass a law. Well, there are laws against caste discrimination, but it still exists. What do you do about that? It's something that just has to be, I'm sorry, it just has to be sort of, we have to grow out of it. because otherwise you have to put all the people in prison or you kill all the people that oppose that idea. And it could be another idea. I just picked on caste because we're here. Or it could be female discrimination, female infanticide, all kinds of things that happen in communities that eventually grow out of it happily. I mean,
But how would that change coming out? You're talking about going out of it. How would
well, okay. Well, the thing I would suspect what has happened with private budget schools emerge as a way for people to escape from the public school. Now, the girls, I can't make their parents send the girl to school. They chose the boy. I can't change that. And again, we hate that. We find it immoral. We find it unjust. But what are you going to do about it? Put the parents in jail? Why do they believe that? I don't know. I mean, why do people vote for Donald Trump? I mean, there's lots of, sort of absurdities of life. But again, I go back to what I was saying. If we try to address all the absurdities of life, we will get nowhere. And sometimes we just have to live with injustices. I mean, he brought up Nelson Mandela. Now, Mandela came up with some of the worst injustices imaginable. He's sort of like, well, that was the past. What can I do about the future? And he overcame that. I mean, he was an exceptional man. But, okay, I'm not, look, these are questions that are on the fringe in a sense that there's nothing that governments can do about changing people's behavior. And there's very limited thing that markets, because markets are just people looking for ways to improve their life. Markets aren't, they're problem solvers in that way. They're not saying, I'm going to make culture, open for everybody. That's not your motivation. When you go to the market, you're looking for something that makes you better off.
I mean, if you think about it, so one of the reasons why societies were able to come over historical discrimination was also free markets, because I mean, you need a lot of labor for industrial revolution, so that was one of the reasons why then the culture started shifting towards. Okay,
well, that was the example I used for apartheid. Yeah, and markets can moderate discrimination, and they do, but it won't disappear. It takes time for people to, the girl that was kept out of school feels the injustice, so she works to make sure that the next generation. So I mean, we're not going to solve that. So let me move on. So we need well, wait, you've had a lot of questions and I've got 15 minutes. So let's talk afterwards because, sorry, but I mean, it's just, we'll never end that discussion. Maybe I'll infuriate you on something else. So we need spontaneity if we're going to have innovation. So, do you have spontaneity with central planning? No, I mean, they decide. So, how do we secure human liberty? The founding fathers of the United States thought through their limited democracy had done that. But Margaret Thatcher said something very interesting. The Constitution of Freedom has to be written on the heart as much as on the mind. So if you don't, I mean, again, I don't know how many of you value freedom as much as I do. Let's go ask the auto driver. What does he think about freedom? I don't think about it. They don't want to be free. A lot of people don't want to be free. It's a tough thing. So how do we make people that don't want to be free or don't think about being free live in a place where freedom abounds? It's a tough question. Because if they're not alert to it, it goes away. So, what are we looking for? We're looking for moral codes. So that when we see humanity, and again, humanity progresses. It's not going to be like this. Happily. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. But I grew up under segregation. It didn't last. Happily. And it took time. It was unjust. It was horrible. It got better. There are people who believe it didn't get better, but I lived through it. Of course, I was on the other side, but it got better. Now, so we're looking for ways to let people cooperate, you know. Justice is an attribute and a consequence of individual behavior. This idea of social justice, I don't get it. How does inventing an adjective improve on justice? Or applying it could be shoe justice, or it could be, banner, or, No, there's just justice. And where does it come from? Well, it's the outcome of how we behave towards each other. That's all I can say. Again, I'm not a philosopher. Philosophers would give me, oh, well, okay, I'm a simple guy. I'm just trying to find, for me, the essence. Now, what's essential for that? Well, no unprovoked violence. No unnecessary, So I can't. Now, if you attack me, I'm entitled to defend myself and my family. Both justice, and fairness, I think they're, in most people, it comes from self-ownership. It's just that you own yourself and that you have command over what you produce peacefully and lawfully. Easy. Again, I'm an essentialist. I'm not a genius. Now, self-ownership, you own yourself. You're entitled to enjoy what you produced, or you're entitled to give it away. You're entitled to sell it. So you need protection to your private property rights, which is really the essence of human rights. It's the ability to be human. That's why I call it a natural right, because it's your nature of being human that allows you. Now, so gangs or individuals abuse that, or governments tend to overuse political power. So we have in Venezuela, where elections are overturned, the outcome of elections are ignored or overturned or whatever. So democracy was an escape from political power. It was not about transferring that power to someone else. Now, when Congress and BJP argue over taking the reins of power, they're never promising or never delivering reductions in corruption, reductions in, of course, over time there have been reforms in the license Raj and all that, but, they're really contesting over exactly what the political scientists say, the peaceful transfer of power. They want power. Again, the good ones, I'm going to do good things, give me more power, more resources. The bad ones, I'm going to steal everything, I need more. It's the same. You have less freedom, fewer resources. So now, political governance is about force. Markets are about choice. So we have either state sovereignty or personal sovereignty, individual sovereignty. So we either have power, which says you must do this, or you have a purpose, you pursue it. Now, when those don't coincide, which one loses? Now, if your purpose was to dominate him or to enslave him, okay, maybe we enlist the state to help it. But that's very limited, what we really want from the state. So political power is threat. Okay, for good, right? I'll arrest you if you beat her up. Okay, that's a good thing. But if you don't pay your taxes or whatever, compulsion and punishment. Difficult to avoid, resist or challenge. You only have, electoral cycles every 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 years, whatever. Tends to be permanent. So now, when new legislatures come in, at the beginning of every legislative session, they say, okay, before we do anything, let's go through the body of legislation and throw out everything that's irrelevant. No. What now can we do? How can we add to this? They don't care. And you don't require it. So, I mean, this is how we get there. Now, again, if there were sunset laws in every piece of legislation so that after 5 years it had to be voted on again or it went out, we would have a smaller body. But who has to decide that? They do. Are they going to do it? No. Yeah.
Have sunset clauses ever really?
Well, that's the problem.
Patriot Act or something like that.
The problem is they have to do it. They have to say, well, okay, we will be. They're not interested. They're just, I mean, the fringe is interested. People who care. And the rest of them. Yeah. So, okay, legal use of violence and so on. Now, economics, voluntary and interactive. Markets are about bid and offer, right? I want that. How much you're willing to pay? Not enough. Bid and offer, bid and offer. You only engage if it makes you better off. You can avoid it. I don't have to buy a Tesla, right? But I have to pay my taxes. Contested. This is the reason I don't worry about what people call economic power. Because Nokia, remember Nokia? The most powerful telephone producer. Whoops, what happened to Nokia? Economic power is contested. Everybody wants an Apple or Samsung or now Oppo or, I mean, economic power just doesn't last very long unless government supports it. Thank God that no government supported Nokia. We all have better hand phones. So it tends to be temporary. And the only way markets will work is if we cooperate with each other. If I say, you have to buy my product. If you see me, you'll run. No. You come in because I was nice to you. Hey, I like your jacket. Oh, I want some shoes. Whatever. This is how. And I like that double thank you. It's funny because, here's a journalist who's given people like Tom and me an expression to explain market transactions. I mean, it's really interesting and I don't know, he probably got it from a student, who knows. But that's what markets are, double thank you. It's really unusual. Now, so political power is only permanent source of oppression. But many people worry about economic power. But of course, it's politically convenient because then we say, Elon Musk, he has so much money. He won't miss it if we take some away. I'm done, I think. I forgot. Okay. So don't worry about those people unless the state protects them. They will lose like Nokia did. So we start with the divine right of kings, as I mentioned. Then now we have the divine right of democracy. Out of the frying pan, or out of the fire into the frying pan. We're not burning up, but it's still not such a good place to be. So it's really a corrupted idea that we have this social contract. I have an obligation to pay for the poor guy at the bottom of the pyramid. It's a political obligation. Yeah, I don't know. Now, so I didn't sign the contract. My parents didn't sign one on my behalf. So what's the social contract? Now, of course, there is these implicit things, but most of us believe in individual freedom and property rights. But democracy's undermining that, is challenging that every day. So that social contract is what, and again, I'll repeat my conversation earlier. Most citizens, their position about the political conditions comes from the political parties, not from them. We don't control the parties. They give us direction. We don't think so, but we say, I always support BJP. I always support Congress. So what do they believe? Well, that's what I believe. Where'd that come from? Did we tell it to them? No. So now, representative democracy, that's an illusion of choice. We believe we're choosing we're choosing people who implement what we want to have done. A tyranny of legislation, once it's in, we're stuck with it. Now, so I teach law and economics, and so I make a difference between law, which I mean the rule of law, which is metaphysical, and legislation, which is some oddballs, MPs, congressmen, that decide what, the rules that we should. Now, those are arbitrary. Now, the rule of law was evolved, tested out, and we know what was good or bad. What was bad, we might get rid of. But here, it's what they impose on us, legislation. That's a real different animal. So remember that. They all violate, unless they're declaring the state bird or the state reptile, or what. That's about the only thing that's neutral, because legislation is about subsidy, protectionism, privilege, not about promoting human liberty, protecting property rights. So the essential problem is democracy is an instrument to transfer power, not freedom. And if you listen to politicians, democracy, 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 it's never liberty, liberty, liberty. Now, if they say Donald Trump is an enemy of democracy, if I believe he was a friend of liberty, I might vote for him, because being an enemy of democracy, as it is today, is not a bad thing. In other words, you're an enemy because you want to limit it. You know what Botox is? Democracy is like Botox. It's a poison. A little bit, some people think, makes them look better. A lot, it'll kill you. That's democracy. We need a little bit. A little bit means protect liberty and property. That's Botox. But what we have now is botulism. And it's beginning to infect us, unfortunately, because people accept redistribution, subsidies, and they vote for people who promise them. That's not what it was meant to deliver. It was meant to deliver us from these arbitrary abuses. Okay, well, anyway, I'll be happy to. Now, I'll end with that one thing. What is more dangerous, unlimited markets or unlimited democracy? Now, unlimited democracy means you can judge and decide what everybody else's lives will be. Now, unlimited markets means competition, cooperation, peace. So that's one of my exam questions I will ask my students at the end of a course. And so I get interesting answers because, unlimited democracy sounds good. We want democracy, but no, we want limited democracy. And of course, we want some limits on markets. We don't want to have markets in human flesh or, but again, the rule of law takes care of that. We don't need necessarily legislation for that. So anyway, I'll give you these, or he'll provide them. We're out of time. Thank you very much.